The Arizona Territory stretched out like a wounded beast beneath the copper sun of 1878. Red mesas rose from the desert floor like ancient monuments to forgotten gods, and the wind carried whispers of a land that had seen empires rise and fall long before the white man's wagons carved their scars across its face. In this unforgiving country where rattlesnakes coiled in the shadows and mountain lions stalked the ridges, survival was not a right, but a privilege earned through blood, sweat, and an intimate understanding of death. Samuel Blackwood rode his weathered Mustang through a canyon so narrow that the walls seemed to press against his shoulders. He was 32 years old, though the lines etched into his sun-darkened face suggested a man who had lived several lifetimes compressed into 3 decades. His eyes were the color of storm clouds gathering over distant peaks, and they moved constantly, scanning every shadow, every outcropping, every place where danger might crouch in waiting. He had been tracking a magnificent bull elk for 3 days now. The creature had led him deep into Apache territory, far from the relative safety of the settlements that clung to the edges of this wild country. Samuel knew the risks. Every white man who ventured into these lands carried stories of scalped pioneers and burning homesteads. But Samuel Blackwood was not like other men. He had grown up on the frontier, raised by a father who taught him that the wilderness demanded respect rather than conquest. The elk's tracks were fresh in the red dust, and Samuel could read them like other men read newspapers. The animal was tired, its stride shortened by the endless chase. But it was cunning, too, doubling back through rocky terrain where its hoofprints would be harder to follow. Samuel smiled despite his cracked lips. He admired the creature's will to survive. What Samuel did not know was that he himself had become prey. From a ridge 300 yards above, a young woman watched his progress through the canyon with the patient intensity of a hawk studying a mouse. She was called Kaya by her people, which meant elder sister in the tongue of the Chiricahua Apache. At 24 summers, she had already earned a reputation that made warriors twice her age speak her name with grudging respect. Kaya was not supposed to be a hunter. The Apache traditions held that women gathered food and prepared hides, while men pursued the deer and elk that provided meat for the band. But Kaya had been different from her first breath. Her mother died bringing her into the world, and her father, a renowned hunter named Gray Wolf, had raised her as if she were the son he never had. She had killed her first deer at 12 summers. By 16, she could track a rabbit across bare rock. At 20, she brought down a mountain lion that had been terrorizing the band's horse herd. The elders shook their heads and muttered about the disruption of proper ways, but they ate the meat she brought and wore the furs she prepared, and their complaints grew softer with each passing season. Now Kaya watched the white man below with a mixture of curiosity and professional assessment. She had been tracking him for 2 days, ever since he crossed the invisible boundary that separated Apache land from the territories claimed by the American government. Most white men who entered these lands came with rifles and murder in their hearts. They shot at anything that moved, leaving wounded animals to suffer and carcasses to rot in the sun. But this one was different. Kaya had watched him pass within easy rifle range of a doe and her fawn without even raising his weapon. She had seen him stop to let his horse drink at a spring, carefully avoiding the muddy banks where his presence would foul the water for other creatures. Most telling of all, she had observed his tracking technique, and what she saw made her narrow her eyes in surprise. He tracked like an Apache. His movements were deliberate but fluid. He read the signs in the earth with the patience of a man who understood that haste was the enemy of success. When the trail grew difficult, he did not force his way forward but stopped, considered, and found the path that the elk itself had chosen. This was not the clumsy persistence of a white hunter. This was artistry. Kaya found herself leaning forward, her curiosity overcoming her caution. Who was this man who moved through Apache country as if he belonged here? Where had he learned to hunt with such skill? And why did watching him stir something unfamiliar in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the blazing sun overhead? She decided to test him. Moving with the silence that years of practice had made instinctive, Kaya descended from the ridge and circled ahead of the white man's path. She found a place where the canyon opened into a small valley, a natural clearing where the elk would likely stop to graze on the tough desert grass. Here, she would see what this stranger was truly made of. Samuel emerged from the canyon an hour before sunset, his eyes immediately finding the elk he had been pursuing. The magnificent creature stood at the far end of the clearing, its massive antlers catching the golden light like a crown. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. In all his years of hunting, he had never seen such a perfect specimen. He dismounted slowly, looping his horse's reins around a scrub oak. His rifle came up with practiced smoothness, the stock settling against his shoulder as if it had been carved to fit him. The elk was perhaps 200 yards away, a challenging shot but well within his capabilities. His finger found the trigger, and then he paused. Something was wrong. The elk was too calm, too unconcerned with the presence of a predator. Its ears should have been swiveling, its nostrils flaring to catch the scent of danger. Instead, it grazed peacefully, as if it had not just spent 3 days fleeing for its life. Samuel lowered his rifle and studied the clearing with new eyes. The grass was undisturbed except for the elk's immediate vicinity. No other tracks marked the soft earth. But there, at the edge of his vision, he caught a flicker of movement among the rocks that bordered the western edge of the valley. He did not react visibly. His heartbeat remained steady, his breathing unchanged, but his mind raced through possibilities. Apache warriors. How many? 1? A dozen? Were they waiting for him to take the shot, to be distracted by his kill while they closed in for their own? Samuel made a decision. Instead of raising his rifle toward the hidden watchers, he turned his back on them deliberately and walked toward his horse. He removed his canteen and took a long drink. Then he sat down on a flat rock, pulled a piece of dried meat from his saddlebag, and began to eat. From her hiding place, Kaya watched this display with growing astonishment. The white man knew he was being watched. His brief hesitation before lowering his rifle told her that much, and yet instead of fleeing or fighting, he had simply sat down to eat his dinner as if he were in the middle of a peaceful meadow rather than surrounded by potential enemies. Either he was the bravest man she had ever seen, or he was completely insane. She waited as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson. The elk, which had been a decoy she arranged using scent markers and her knowledge of the creature's habits, eventually wandered off to find water. Still, the white man sat, occasionally glancing toward her hiding spot with an expression that seemed almost amused. Finally, as darkness began to gather in the corners of the valley, Samuel spoke. His voice carried clearly in the still evening air. "I know you are there. I have known for some time. If you meant to kill me, you would have done so already. So perhaps you would like to share my fire instead. It will be a cold night." Kaya felt her cheeks flush with a combination of embarrassment and admiration. No one had ever detected her presence when she did not wish to be detected. No one except her father, and he had died 3 winters past from a fever that no medicine could cure. She rose from the rocks and walked toward the white man with her head held high. She would not skulk like a coyote caught stealing from the cooking fires. If this man had earned the right to know she was there, she would face him with dignity. Samuel watched the Apache woman emerge from the shadows, and his breath caught in his chest for the second time that evening. She was tall for a woman, with muscles that spoke of a life spent in constant motion. Her hair was black as a raven's wing, worn in the traditional style of her people. But it was her eyes that captured him, dark pools that reflected the dying light like obsidian mirrors. She carried a rifle, he noticed, and a knife at her belt. Her clothing was practical rather than decorative, designed for movement and stealth. This was not a woman who waited in camp while others hunted. This was a predator. "You track well for a white man," she said. Her English was accented but clear, learned perhaps from the missionaries who occasionally ventured into Apache territory before the latest wave of warfare drove them away. Samuel inclined his head in acknowledgement. "You hide well for someone who has been following me for 2 days." Kaya's eyes widened slightly before she controlled her reaction. He had known even longer than she suspected. Her estimation of this stranger climbed another notch. "Why do you come to our lands?" she asked. "Most white men who enter uninvited do not leave alive." Samuel gestured toward the direction the elk had disappeared. "I was following that bull. The finest creature I have seen in 20 years of hunting. I meant no disrespect to your people or your territory. I simply could not let such a magnificent animal escape without seeing where it led." "And now that you have seen, now that you know you hunt on Apache land?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. "I suppose that depends on what happens next. You could kill me. You are armed, and I suspect you know how to use that rifle better than most soldiers I have met. Or you could let me go, and I would return to my own lands with a story of the elk that got away. Or—" He paused, a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Or we could share this fire and talk about hunting, since it seems we share that interest." Kaya found herself fighting an answering smile. The arrogance of this man was astonishing. He sat surrounded by potential enemies, his life hanging by a thread, and he spoke of sharing stories as if they were old friends meeting at a trading post. And yet there was something in his confidence that she recognized. It was not the bluster of a fool too stupid to understand danger. It was the calm assurance of someone who had faced death many times and made peace with its inevitability. Her father had possessed that same quality. Without making a conscious decision, Kaya walked forward and sat on a rock across from the white man. She laid her rifle across her knees, close enough to grab if needed, but not pointed at him. It was as close to a gesture of trust as she was prepared to offer. "I am called Kaya," she said. "I am a hunter of the Chiricahua band." "Samuel Blackwood." "I am a hunter too, as you have seen." "Yes." Kaya studied his face in the gathering darkness. "You hunt differently than other white men. You hunt like one of us. How did you learn this?" Samuel's expression grew distant, his eyes looking at something far beyond the valley walls. "My father. He was a mountain man before he settled down and married my mother. He spent 15 years living in the wilderness, trading furs and learning the ways of the land. He used to say that the only men who truly understood hunting were the native peoples who had been doing it for 1,000 generations. He sought them out, traded with them, learned from them, and he taught me everything he knew. Your father was wise." Kaya meant it as a simple statement of fact, but the words came out warmer than she intended. "He was. He died when I was 19. Killed by a grizzly bear he had wounded but failed to finish. His last words were a warning never to shoot at something I was not prepared to kill. It is a lesson I have never forgotten." They sat in silence as darkness claimed the valley completely. Samuel built a small fire using techniques that minimized smoke and light. Kaya watched his movements with approval. This man understood that fire was both friend and enemy, warmth and beacon. "That elk," she said eventually. "You were tracking it for 3 days. Why did you not shoot when you had the chance?" Samuel poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "It did not feel right. The elk was too calm. The situation was too perfect. My father taught me to trust those instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Kaya nodded slowly. It was exactly what she would have taught a student, if she had any. The greatest hunters were not those with the steadiest aim or the strongest arms. They were the ones who listened to the whispers of the world around them. I arranged that elk, she admitted. I used scent markers to calm it and lead it to that clearing. I wanted to see what you would do when presented with an easy kill. Samuel laughed, a genuine sound of delight that echoed off the canyon walls. And what did you learn from your test? Kaya considered the question seriously. I learned that you are not like other white men. You think before you act. You observe before you shoot. These are not common qualities among your people. They are not common qualities among any people, Samuel replied. Most men, regardless of the color of their skin, act first and think later. It is a flaw that gets many of them killed. The fire crackled between them, creating a small island of warmth in the cold desert night. Above, stars began to appear in numbers that city dwellers could never imagine, a river of light flowing across the black sky. Kaya found herself relaxing in spite of her training. This man was not a threat, at least not in the immediate sense. He was something far more dangerous to her peace of mind. He was interesting. I have a question for you, she said. Ask it. Why do you hunt? You are clearly skilled enough to make your living in many ways. Why choose this life of endless tracking and sleeping on cold ground? Samuel was quiet for so long that Kaya wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. Because when I hunt, I feel connected to something larger than myself. Every track I follow, every animal I pursue, teaches me something about the world and my place in it. The wilderness does not care about politics or money or the petty concerns that consume most men. It cares only about survival and balance. When I am out here, I am reduced to my essential self. I am simply a creature trying to live another day, like everything else. There is a purity in that which I have never found anywhere else. Kaya stared at him across the flickering flames. Her heart was beating faster than it should, and her mouth had gone dry. In all her life, she had never heard anyone articulate so perfectly the feelings that drove her own existence. Not even her father had been able to put into words what the hunt meant to her. This white man, this stranger who had wandered into her territory chasing an elk, had just spoken the truth of her soul, as if he had lifted it directly from her chest. She stood abruptly, suddenly needing distance between them. These feelings were dangerous. He was a white man, an enemy of her people by birth and blood. Whatever connection she felt was an illusion, created by firelight and loneliness. I must return to my camp, she said, her voice carefully neutral. You should leave Apache territory tomorrow. The warriors who patrol these canyons will not be as curious as I am. They will simply kill you and take your horse. Samuel rose as well, his movements respectful rather than challenging. I understand. Thank you for the warning and for the conversation. It has been unexpected. Kaya nodded once and turned to leave. She had taken 3 steps into the darkness when Samuel's voice stopped her. Kaya, she turned, her hand instinctively moving toward her rifle. I will be hunting in the valley beyond the Red Mesa tomorrow. It is outside your territory, I believe. If you wish to continue our conversation about tracking techniques, you would be welcome to find me there. It was not an invitation to romance. It was not a declaration of anything inappropriate. It was simply one hunter acknowledging another, extending an offer of professional respect. Kaya should have refused. Every sensible bone in her body screamed that this was foolishness, that nothing good could come from associating with a white man in these times of war and hatred. Perhaps, she said, and disappeared into the night before she could say anything more. Samuel watched the darkness swallow her, his heart pounding in a way it had not pounded in years. He had met many women in his travels, beautiful and plain, kind and cruel. None of them had affected him the way this Apache Huntress had in a single evening of conversation. He told himself it was simply professional admiration. She was clearly skilled, and he respected skill above almost all other qualities. The way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes, the depth of understanding she showed when discussing the hunt, these were things he rarely encountered in anyone. But deep down, in a place he was not yet ready to examine, Samuel knew it was more than that. Something had shifted in the universe tonight. Something had begun that could not easily be stopped. As he settled beside his fire and pulled his blanket around his shoulders, Samuel Blackwood wondered what tomorrow would bring. And for the first time in many years, he felt something that might have been hope. The sun had barely touched the eastern horizon when Kaya left her camp and began the journey toward the Red Mesa. She told herself she was simply curious about the white man's tracking methods. She told herself that learning from an outsider could make her a better hunter. She told herself many things during that long walk across the desert, and none of them were entirely true. The valley beyond the Red Mesa was a place she knew well. It was technically outside Chiricahua territory, a neutral zone where different peoples had hunted since before anyone could remember. Her grandmother had spoken of a time when Apache, Navajo, and Comanche hunters would encounter each other in these lands and exchange knowledge rather than arrows. Those days were long gone, swept away by the tide of white settlers and the wars that followed. She found Samuel exactly where he said he would be, kneeling beside a game trail and examining tracks with the focused attention of a scholar reading ancient texts. He did not look up as she approached, though she knew he was aware of her presence. His awareness was like her own, a constant hum of vigilance that never truly faded. "Mule deer," he said without preamble. "A buck, maybe 3 years old. He passed through here shortly after sunrise, heading toward the waterhole to the north." Kaya crouched beside him and studied the tracks herself. He was right about everything except one detail. 4 years old, she corrected. "See how the edges of the hoof prints are slightly worn? That comes with age. A 3-year-old buck would leave sharper impressions." Samuel examined the tracks again, then nodded slowly. "You are right. I should have looked more closely." There was no defensiveness in his voice, only genuine appreciation for the correction. They spent the morning hunting together, though neither of them spoke much about what they were doing. Words seemed unnecessary when two people understood each other so completely. Samuel would point to a broken twig, and Kaya would nod and indicate the direction the animal had traveled. Kaya would pause to examine disturbed soil, and Samuel would already be scanning the ridge where their quarry had likely gone. By midday, they had tracked a small herd of pronghorn to a watering hole hidden in a fold of the hills. The animals drank peacefully, unaware of the two predators watching from the rocks above. "Beautiful," Samuel murmured, his voice barely audible. Kaya glanced at him and found that he was not looking at the pronghorn. He was looking at her. She felt heat rise to her cheeks and quickly turned her attention back to the herd. This was dangerous ground, more treacherous than any canyon or cliff face. She needed to redirect the conversation before it went somewhere she was not prepared to follow. "Why did you become a hunter?" she asked. "You said last night that your father taught you. But many sons learn from their fathers without following the same path." Samuel settled back against a rock, his eyes returning to the pronghorn as if he had never looked away. "After my father died, I tried to live a normal life. I worked as a ranch hand for a while, then as a deputy sheriff in a small town in Texas, but I always felt like I was wearing clothes that did not fit. The walls of buildings pressed in on me, The endless talk of money and politics made my head ache. One day I simply saddled my horse and rode out into the wilderness. I have not really come back since. You have no family? No wife? The question escaped before Kaya could stop it. She bit her lip, angry at herself for revealing such obvious curiosity. If Samuel noticed her discomfort, he did not show it. I was engaged once, many years ago. A girl named Elizabeth from the town where I worked. She was kind and pretty and everything a man is supposed to want, but she could not understand why I would rather sleep under the stars than in a feather bed. She could not understand why I would turn down a steady job to chase animals through the wilderness. Eventually, she married a store owner and had 3 children. I hear she is very happy. Do you regret it? Samuel considered the question with the same careful attention he gave to tracking. I regret hurting her. She deserved better than a man who could not give her what she needed. But do I regret the choice itself? No, I am what I am. Pretending otherwise would have made us both miserable. Kaya understood this more deeply than she could express. How many times had the elders suggested she find a husband and settle into a proper woman's role? How many young warriors had offered her marriage, only to withdraw in confusion when she declined? She was not like other women. She had accepted this truth long ago, even if it meant spending her life alone. Among my people, she said slowly, there is a belief that the Creator makes certain souls to be hunters. These souls cannot be happy in any other life. They are born with the wilderness in their blood and the wind in their hearts. To force such a soul into a different shape is to kill something sacred. Samuel turned to look at her, his gray eyes intense. Your people are wise. Some of them are. Kaya allowed herself a small smile. Others are as foolish as people anywhere. They fear what they do not understand and hate what they cannot control. But the old teachings, the ones passed down from generation to generation, hold much truth. They sat in comfortable silence as the pronghorn finished drinking and drifted away across the grassland. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning coolness and reminding them both that the desert showed no mercy to the unprepared. We should find shade, Samuel said. Hunt again when the shadows grow longer. Kaya hesitated. What he suggested was sensible from a practical standpoint. No experienced hunter pursued game during the hottest part of the day, but accepting his invitation meant spending more hours in his company, letting this strange connection deepen. There is a cave nearby, she heard herself say. It stays cool even when the sun is at its peak. The cave was exactly as she remembered it, a shallow depression in the hillside that provided relief from the brutal heat. They sat at its entrance, close enough to feel the cooler air but still able to watch the valley below. Samuel shared the dried meat and water he carried, and Kaya contributed roots she had gathered along the way. Tell me about your father, Samuel said as they ate. You speak of him with great respect. Kaya's heart tightened at the mention of Grey Wolf, but the pain was old now, worn smooth by time like a river stone. He was the greatest hunter our band has ever known. He could track a fish through water and a bird through air. The animals respected him, even as they fell to his arrows. He taught me everything he knew, even though the elders disapproved of training a girl in men's work. Why did he do it? Because he saw something in me that he recognized in himself. He used to say that hunting was not a skill but a calling, that some people were born to it, and denying them that birthright was a crime against nature. He said that I had the spirit of a hunter, and that it would be wrong to cage such a spirit simply because I was born in a woman's body. Samuel nodded slowly. Your father sounds like someone I would have liked to know. He would have liked you too, I think. The admission surprised Kaya even as she spoke it. He always said that there were good people among the white settlers, people who understood the land and respected its ways. He said that if both sides could find more such people, perhaps there would not need to be so much killing. The conversation shifted to darker matters then. The endless war between the Apache and the American government that had claimed so many lives on both sides. Kaya spoke of raids that had killed her uncle and 2 cousins. Samuel spoke of a settlement he had visited the day after an Apache war party passed through, the bodies of children lying in the dust. They did not argue about who was right or who was wrong. Both of them understood that such questions had no simple answers. The violence had its own momentum now, a wheel of revenge that kept spinning no matter how many people were crushed beneath it. "Sometimes I think it will never end," Kaya said quietly. "That we will keep killing each other until there is no one left." "Perhaps." Samuel's voice was heavy with a sorrow that matched her own. "Or perhaps one day people on both sides will grow tired of burying their children. Perhaps they will decide that survival is more important than pride." "Do you believe that?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "I believe it is possible. Whether it is likely, I cannot say. But I have seen too much of the world to give up hope entirely. Miracles happen. Enemies become friends. The impossible becomes possible. All we can do is try to add to the good in the world rather than the evil." Kaya looked at this strange white man who spoke of hope in the midst of hopelessness, who hunted like an Apache and thought like a philosopher. Her heart was racing again, and this time she did not try to deny why. "We should not see each other again after today," she said. "It is too dangerous. If my people knew I was meeting with a white man, they would think I was a traitor. If your people knew you were friendly with an Apache, they would think the same." Samuel did not argue. He simply looked at her with those storm cloud eyes and asked, "Is that what you want?" The word yes should have come easily. It was the sensible answer, the safe answer. But Kaya found that she could not speak it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they were not saying. "No," she finally admitted. "It is not what I want. But what I want and what is wise are rarely the same thing." Samuel reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she did not, his fingers brushed against hers, a touch so light it might have been imagined. "My father used to say that wisdom without courage was just another word for cowardice, that sometimes the wise thing to do was the thing that scared you most." Kaya looked down at their almost touching hands. Her father had said something similar once, when she was afraid to climb a cliff that led to the best hunting grounds. "Fear is not your enemy," he had told her. "Fear is your teacher. Listen to what it tells you, but do not let it make your decisions." "Tomorrow," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "in the canyon where we first met. I will be there at sunrise." Samuel's fingers curled around hers just for a moment before releasing. "Then I will be there too." They parted as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, each returning to their separate worlds. Kaya walked through the desert with her heart singing a song she had never heard before, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She knew she was stepping onto a path that led into unknown territory, more dangerous than any wilderness she had ever crossed, and she could not bring herself to turn back. The following weeks became a pattern that neither of them questioned. They met in hidden places, always far from the eyes of both their peoples. They hunted together, tracked together, shared meals and conversations that ranged from tracking techniques to the nature of the soul. With each meeting, the connection between them deepened, becoming something neither of them had words for. Kaya learned that Samuel had a gift for reading weather that bordered on the supernatural. He could predict storms days in advance, sensing changes in the wind and sky that escaped most observers. She taught him the Apache methods of preparing meat so it would last through long journeys, techniques that had been perfected over generations. Samuel shared the knowledge his father had gathered from a dozen different tribes, hunting secrets that made Kaya's eyes widen with appreciation. She showed him the trails that her people had used for centuries, paths so hidden that they were invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, but they also shared things that had nothing to do with hunting. Samuel spoke of the books he carried in his saddlebags, worn copies of poetry and philosophy that he read by firelight on lonely nights. Kaya told him the stories her grandmother had passed down, tales of the time before time when the world was new and animals could speak to humans. One evening, as they sat watching the stars emerge above a hidden valley, Kaya asked the question that had been burning in her mind for weeks. "What is this between us, Samuel? What are we doing?" He did not pretend to misunderstand. "I think we are falling in love. I think we have been falling since the first night we met." The words hung in the air like smoke from a sacred fire. Kaya felt them settle into her heart, confirming what she already knew but had been afraid to name. "There is no future for such a love," she said. "Your people would never accept an Apache woman. My people would exile me for choosing a white man. We would belong nowhere, to no one. We would belong to each other." Samuel turned to face her, his expression serious but unafraid. "I know it would be hard. I know we would face hatred from all sides. But I have spent my life running from difficult things, Kaya. I ran from Elizabeth because loving her was too complicated. I ran from settlements because fitting in was too hard. For once in my life, I want to stop running. I want to stand my ground and fight for something that matters." Tears pricked at Kaya's eyes, and she blinked them away angrily. She was a hunter, a warrior in all but name. She did not cry over words, no matter how beautiful they were. "And what about children?" she asked, her voice thick. "Any children we had would be outcasts in both worlds. They would carry the blood of two peoples who hate each other." Samuel reached out and took her hands in his grip warm and steady. "They would carry the blood of two peoples who know how to survive. They would have the best of both worlds, if we taught them right. They would be hunters born of hunters, with skills that neither Apache nor white man could match alone." Kaya stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What he was suggesting was madness. It defied every rule she had been raised to follow, every warning the elders had ever issued about the treachery of white men. And yet, looking into his eyes, she saw something that she had never seen in any man before. She saw herself reflected back, a soul that understood her completely because it was made of the same material. She saw a partner who would walk beside her through any wilderness, no matter how dangerous. "My grandmother had a saying," she said slowly. "She said that when the Creator brings two souls together, no power on earth can keep them apart. That such unions are blessed, even when they bring pain." "And do you believe that?" Kaya took a deep breath, feeling as if she stood on the edge of a great canyon about to leap into the void. "I believe that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I believe that when we hunt together, it is like finding a part of myself that I did not know was missing. And I believe that if I walk away from this, I will regret it for the rest of my life." Samuel's face broke into a smile that transformed his weather-worn features, making him look suddenly younger. "Is that a yes?" "That is a maybe," Kaya said, but she was smiling too. "Much would have to happen before it could become a yes. My people would need to be convinced. Your people would need to accept me. We would need to find a place where we could live without fear. Then we will do those things. Whatever it takes, whatever challenges we face, we will overcome them together." He pulled her close then, and for the first time, their lips met. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Two people exploring new territory with the caution they would bring to any unknown landscape. But then it deepened, becoming something fierce and hungry, a claiming and a surrender all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. The stars wheeled overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the rising moon. "Tomorrow we must begin planning," Kaya said. "We cannot simply announce our intentions and hope for the best. There are people on both sides who would kill us rather than see such a union succeed." "I know. We will be careful. We will be patient. And when the time is right, we will make our move." They stayed together until the moon set, talking through possibilities and dangers, making plans that might take months or years to execute. It was the conversation of two strategists facing a difficult campaign, but it was also the conversation of two people building a life together, brick by careful brick. As dawn approached, Kaya rose to leave. She had responsibilities back at camp that could not be ignored. But before she disappeared into the morning shadows, she turned back one last time. "Samuel Blackwood." "Yes?" "Only a hunter of your caliber could continue my lineage. Only someone who understands what I am could give me children worthy of the name they would carry." Samuel stood frozen, the full meaning of her words washing over him like a wave. She was not just accepting his love. She was acknowledging him as her equal, as the only man she had ever met who was worthy of joining his blood with hers. "I will honor that trust," he said quietly. "Every day of my life I will honor it." Kaya nodded once, her eyes bright with emotion she would not let herself fully express. Then she was gone, vanishing into the desert as completely as a ghost. Samuel stood alone in the growing light, his heart fuller than it had ever been. The path ahead would be dangerous. The obstacles might prove insurmountable. But for the first time in his solitary life, he had something worth fighting for. And he would fight for it with everything he had. 3 moons had passed since Kaya and Samuel declared their intentions to each other beneath the stars. 3 moons of secret meetings, careful planning, and growing dread as the political situation between the Apache and the American government deteriorated with each passing day. Soldiers were massing at Fort Apache, and rumors of a new campaign to push the Chiricahua onto a reservation in Florida spread through the territory like wildfire. Kaya walked through the camp of her people with her heart heavy in her chest. The preparations for war surrounded her on all sides. Young men painted their faces and sharpened their weapons. Women packed supplies and taught children where to hide if the soldiers came. The air itself seemed thick with tension and fear. She had told no one about Samuel. The secret burned inside her like a coal that she could neither extinguish nor release. Every day she felt the weight of her deception growing heavier, and every night she dreamed of gray eyes and gentle hands and a future that seemed increasingly impossible. Running Bear, one of the most respected warriors in the band, approached her as she was preparing to leave camp for what she claimed was a hunting expedition. His face was kind but concerned. "You have been going on many hunts lately, Kaya, and yet you return with little game. Are the animals avoiding your arrows? Or are you avoiding something else?" Kaya met his gaze steadily, drawing on every ounce of self-control she possessed. "The game has been scarce. The soldiers scare everything away with their guns and their noise." Running Bear studied her for a long moment. He was old enough to be her father, and he had known Gray Wolf well. There was wisdom in his weathered face, and something that might have been suspicion. "Be careful out there," he finally said. "These are dangerous times. The wilderness holds many threats that have nothing to do with animals." Kaya nodded and made her escape, her heart pounding with the fear of discovery. She had to warn Samuel that their situation had grown more precarious. They needed to accelerate their plans before circumstances forced them apart forever. She found him waiting at their usual meeting place, a hidden grotto where water seeped from the rocks and sustained a small oasis of green in the red desert. His face lit up when he saw her, but the smile faded as he registered her expression. "What has happened?" Kaya sat beside him and told him everything she had observed over the past few days. The preparations for war, the increasing suspicion of the elders, the rumors of forced relocation that would scatter her people to the winds. Samuel listened in silence, his jaw tight with frustration. The situation in the settlements is just as bad. Men are forming militias to hunt Apache. They do not distinguish between warriors and children, enemies and neutrals. They simply want blood. Then we must leave soon, before the violence makes escape impossible. They had discussed this possibility many times. Samuel knew of a place far to the north, a valley in the mountains where few people ventured. It was difficult to reach and offered little in the way of the resources that drew settlers west. But it was beautiful and isolated, a place where two people might build a life away from the madness that was consuming the territory. "Can you leave tonight?" Samuel asked. "I have already gathered supplies. We could be in the mountains before either side realizes we are gone." Kaya wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee with this man, to embrace the future they had dreamed about. But she could not silence the voice that whispered of duty and honor and the people who depended on her. "There is something I must do first. My grandmother is very old, and her time grows short. If I leave without saying goodbye, without explaining why I am going, she will die thinking I abandoned her." Samuel took her hands in his eyes full of understanding. "Then go to her. Tell her what you must, and meet me at the Red Mesa before dawn. I will wait for you there." Kaya kissed him with desperate intensity, trying to pour all of her fear and hope and love into that single moment of contact. Then she turned and ran back toward her camp, praying that she was not about to destroy everything. The old woman's tent was set apart from the others, as befitted someone who had lived long enough to see 3 generations of her family grow from infants to warriors. Grandmother Singing Wind was nearly blind now, her eyes clouded by the mist that eventually claimed all those fortunate enough to reach great age. But her mind remained sharp, and she sensed Kaya's approach before she entered. "Come in, granddaughter. I have been expecting you." Kaya knelt beside the old woman, taking her withered hand in her own. The bones felt as fragile as bird wings beneath the papery skin, and Kaya was struck by how little time remained to the woman who had helped raise her. "Grandmother, I must tell you something that will be difficult to hear." Singing Wind's lips curved in a knowing smile. "You are going to tell me about the White Hunter, the one you have been meeting in secret all these moons." Kaya's breath caught in her throat. "How did you know?" "Child, I may be old and blind, but I am not stupid. You return from your hunts with stars in your eyes and a song on your lips. You speak of the future with hope instead of resignation. And you have begun to ask questions about how things were in the old days before the hatred between peoples became so great. I would have to be dead and buried not to see the signs." Tears spilled down Kaya's cheeks. "Are you angry with me?" Singing Wind squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "Angry? Why should I be angry? I was young once too, though you may find that hard to believe. I know what it is to love someone who does not fit the expectations of others." "Then you do not condemn me?" The old woman was quiet for a moment, her clouded eyes staring at something far beyond the walls of the tent. "Many generations ago, before the white men came in great numbers, our people lived differently. We traded with other tribes, sometimes peacefully and sometimes not. And occasionally a young woman would fall in love with a man from another people, a Navajo perhaps, or even a Comanche. Such unions were difficult, but they were not forbidden. The elders understood that love follows its own path, regardless of the borders we try to draw. But the white men are not like the Navajo or the Comanche. They have taken so much from us." "Some of them have," Singing Wind agreed. and some of our warriors have taken much from them. Pain begets pain, child. Violence begets violence. Eventually, someone must be brave enough to break the cycle. Kaya stared at her grandmother, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You approve of what I am doing? Singing Wind reached up and touched Kaya's face with fingers that had once been skilled enough to craft the finest bows in the tribe. I approve of you following your heart. I approve of you having the courage to love in a world that seems determined to destroy love. And I approve of you building a future when so many are focused only on death. She pressed something into Kaya's hand, a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. Kaya unwrapped it to find a necklace of turquoise and silver, exquisitely crafted and old beyond reckoning. This belonged to your grandfather, Singing Wind said. He gave it to me on the day we were married. I want you to have it now, to remind you of where you come from as you walk toward where you are going. Kaya clutched the necklace to her chest, overwhelmed by emotion. Grandmother, I cannot take this. It is too precious. It is precious because of what it represents. And what it represents will mean nothing if it stays hidden in an old woman's tent until she dies. Take it. Give it to your children someday. Let it carry our story into the future. They embraced then, grandmother and granddaughter, the old world passing its blessing to the new. Kaya felt something shift inside her, a final release of the guilt and fear that had been holding her back. She had her grandmother's blessing. Whatever happened next, she would face it with a clear heart. I must go soon, she whispered. Before dawn. We are heading north to the mountains. Singing Wind nodded. Then go, and do not look back. The past has nothing left to teach you. Only the future matters now. Kaya rose, her grandmother's necklace clutched in her hand. At the entrance to the tent, she paused and looked back one last time. I love you, grandmother. Thank you for understanding. I love you too, child. Now go. Your hunter is waiting. Kaya slipped out of the camp like a shadow, her heart lighter than it had been in months. The night was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds, but she needed no light to find her way. These lands were written on her soul. She reached the red mesa as the first hints of gray began to lighten the eastern sky. Samuel was there, exactly as he promised, his horse loaded with supplies and a second mount waiting beside it. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice told her how afraid he had been that she would not. I came. She showed him the necklace her grandmother had given her, with my family's blessing. Samuel touched the turquoise with gentle fingers, recognizing the significance of what she held. We will honor this gift. Our children will know where they come from. They will know the stories of both their peoples. They mounted up as the sun began its climb above the horizon. The path ahead would be long and difficult. The mountains were many days distant, and danger lurked on all sides. But they faced it together, two hunters riding into an uncertain future. The first days of travel were tense and watchful. They moved through the wilderness like ghosts, leaving no trail that could be followed. Samuel's skills and Kaya's knowledge of the land combined to keep them hidden from the patrols that crisscrossed the territory. They encountered danger twice. The first time was a group of soldiers making camp near a water source they needed to access. Kaya and Samuel waited in hiding for nearly a full day until the soldiers moved on, their patience born of years of tracking prey that could not be rushed. The second encounter was more personal. A band of Apache warriors, strangers from another group, spotted them crossing an open plain. For a heart-stopping moment, Kaya thought they would have to fight. But the warriors were young, and their leader recognized Kaya from a gathering she had attended years before. Gray Wolf's daughter, he said, surprise evident in his voice. What are you doing so far from your people? And with a white man? Kaya stood tall and met his gaze without flinching. I am following my own path, as my father taught me to do. The young warrior glanced at Samuel, assessing him with the experienced eye of a hunter, evaluating potential prey. Whatever he saw apparently satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. Grey Wolf was a great man. His daughter is free to make her own choices. He gestured to his companions, and they turned away without another word, disappearing into the landscape as quickly as they had appeared. Samuel let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. That could have gone very differently. Yes, Kaya's voice was thoughtful. But my father's name still carries weight, even among those who did not know him personally. His reputation was his greatest gift to me. They pressed on, climbing higher into the mountains as the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder. The landscape changed around them, red desert giving way to pine forests and rushing streams. Game was plentiful here, and they hunted together with the easy partnership of two people who had become perfectly attuned to each other's movements. On the 15th day of their journey, they crested a ridge and looked down into the valley that would become their home. It was beautiful beyond anything Kaya had imagined. A river wound through the center, its waters clear and cold with snowmelt from the peaks above. Meadows of tall grass bordered the water, perfect grazing ground for deer and elk. Forests of pine and aspen climbed the surrounding slopes, offering shelter and resources in abundance. "This is the place," Samuel said quietly. "This is where we will build our life." They descended into the valley as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. That night they made camp beside the river, listening to the water sing over smooth stones and the wind whisper through the trees. For the first time since they had met, they felt truly safe. Building a home took time and effort. Samuel was skilled with an axe, and Kaya knew techniques for constructing shelter that her people had used for generations. They combined their knowledge, creating a cabin that blended the best of both traditions. Solid walls kept out the cold, while a fire pit in the center provided warmth in the traditional Apache style. As winter approached, they hunted with renewed purpose, smoking and drying meat that would see them through the lean months ahead. The work was hard but satisfying, and every evening they fell asleep in each other's arms, exhausted and content. The first snow fell in late autumn, transforming the valley into a wonderland of white. Kaya stood at the door of their cabin, watching the flakes drift down like feathers from the sky, and felt Samuel's arms wrap around her from behind. "Are you happy?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible." She turned in his embrace, looking up at his weathered face. "There is something I must tell you." Samuel's expression shifted to concern. "What is it?" Kaya took his hand and placed it on her belly, which had begun to swell with new life. "By spring, we will be 3, instead of 2. The joy that broke across Samuel's face was like watching the sun rise after a long, dark night. He lifted her in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure, unbridled happiness. "A child," he breathed. "Our child. A hunter's child," Kaya corrected, smiling. "Born to track and survive like both of its parents." Winter passed slowly but peacefully. Samuel read to Kaya from his books of poetry, and she taught him the songs her grandmother had sung. They talked about the future, planning how they would raise their child to honor both cultures, to be a bridge between two worlds that seemed determined to tear each other apart. When spring finally came, melting the snow and bringing new life to the valley, Kaya went into labor on a morning when the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom. Samuel stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. He had never felt so helpless or so terrified. The woman he loved was in pain, and there was nothing he could do to ease it. But Kaya was strong. stronger than anyone he had ever known. She faced the ordeal with the same courage she brought to every challenge, gritting her teeth and pushing through when lesser women would have surrendered. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in colors that matched the moment, their daughter was born. She came into the world screaming, her tiny fists clenched as if ready to fight, her dark eyes looking up at her parents with an intensity that seemed impossible for something so small. "She is perfect," Kaya whispered, cradling the infant against her chest. "Look at her, Samuel. Look at what we made." Samuel looked, and tears streamed down his face. All his life he had run from connection, from commitment, from the vulnerability that came with loving another person. And now, looking at his wife and daughter, he understood that he had been running from the only thing that truly mattered. "What shall we call her?" he asked. Kaya considered the question, studying the tiny face that already showed hints of both her parents. Gray eyes like her father's gazed out from features that echoed her mother's. She was a perfect blend of two peoples, a living testament to the love that had created her. "Hope," Kaya finally said. "In my language, it is Nalin. She will be Nalin Hope Blackwood, a child of two worlds, named for the future rather than the past." Samuel leaned down and kissed his wife, then his daughter. "Nalin Hope Blackwood. It is perfect." The years that followed were not always easy. Sometimes strangers ventured into the valley, and Samuel and Kaya had to decide whether to welcome them or send them away. Sometimes harsh winters tested their supplies and their resolve. Sometimes the ghosts of the past whispered doubts and regrets into their dreams. But they faced every challenge together, as they had faced everything since the night they first met in that canyon so long ago. Their daughter grew strong and skilled, learning to track from both her parents and developing abilities that neither of them could match alone. She was the bridge they had dreamed of, a new kind of person for a new world. And in the quiet evenings when the fire burned low and the stars emerged overhead, Kaya would sometimes tell her daughter about the night she had watched a white hunter track an elk into Apache territory. "I knew then," she would say, her eyes meeting Samuel's across the flames. "I knew that only a hunter of his caliber could continue my lineage. Only someone who understood the wilderness the way I did could give me a child worthy of carrying our blood into the future." "And were you right?" Nalin would ask, though she knew the answer by heart. Kaya would smile then, the smile of a woman who had risked everything for love and found more than she had ever dared to hope for. "Look around you, my daughter. Look at this home, this family, this life we have built. What do you think?" And Nalin would look at her father, at her mother, at the valley that had sheltered them through all their years together. She would feel the strength in her own body, the knowledge in her own mind, the love in her own heart. "I think," she would say, "that you were exactly right." The fire would crackle, the wind would whisper through the pines, and another generation of hunters would settle in for the night. Outside, the wilderness stretched in all directions, vast and dangerous and beautiful. But within the walls of the cabin, there was only warmth and peace and the quiet miracle of a family that should never have existed, but somehow did. This was their legacy. This was their triumph. This was the story they would pass down through generations yet to come. Proof that love could bridge any divide, overcome any obstacle, create any future. All it required was two hunters brave enough to take the first step.